Do you know how many views the hashtag learn on TikTok has?
I have no clue.
Almost 600 billion.
Right. What do you learn on TikTok?
Learn on TikTok.
Okay.
So the platform lends itself very well for people to discover content. And that content isn't only entertaining content. It can be edutainment. It can be educational. Any content that's going to resonate with them. So we went from the age of context, portals, age of knowledge, search, age of social media. And we're now arguably in the fourth phase, which is the age of content. First and foremost, we're an entertainment platform, right? Our mission is to inspire creativity and bring joy. We keep ourselves very aligned to that mission.
I want to welcome you to the second season of Couchonomics with Arjun. Join us this season as we go beyond fintech and payments and embark on the journey into the future of financial services, a future which will be shaped by existing and new developments in technology and innovation, including and not limited to the likes of embedded finance, open banking, ESG, various versions of metaverse, decentralized finance, digital currencies, and other trends. On the couch, we're going to have the most influential and progressive-minded founders, executives, investors, regulators, innovators, and industry commentators from across the MENA region and beyond. Join us as we unravel a multitude of layers of the financial services industry and try to learn how technology will continue to impact the world that we live in. Couchonomics with Arjun is proud to collaborate with some of the most respected and innovative names in the world of payments, fintech, and technology. Arjun is a reliable end-to-end payment solution that provides innovation and flexibility to help businesses achieve their ambition faster by turning payments into a strategic growth driver. Get everything you need with 2U, a Saudi-based super app for delivery, mobility, on-demand services, and a lot more. 2U connects you to everything you need to enrich your daily lives by building an ecosystem across its end consumers, merchants, and reps. Visa is a world leader in digital payments with a mission to connect the world through the most innovative, convenient, reliable, and secure payments network to enable individuals, businesses, and economies to thrive. GDA is a leading fintech and payment solution provider founded in Saudi Arabia, expanding rapidly across the region with established operations in UAE and Egypt. GDA's vision is to empower merchants with the tools to start, manage, and grow their business. M2P pioneers next-gen fintech through innovative offerings across payments, lending, and banking landscapes. Their comprehensive tech stack powers end-to-end banking services, BNPL, customized credit cards, prepaid cards, and more.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode of Couchonomics with Arjun. And today we're going to sort of veer a bit away from the world of financial services. I've got someone on the couch who I wouldn't necessarily call as a fintech person, although I'm sure they're using financial services across their business and they're helping a number of financial services business. Joining me on the couch today is Shant Oknayan, who's the head of business Asia Pac and Middle East and Africa for TikTok. So with that, I'd like to say hello and welcome to Shant. Welcome to the couch.
Thanks for having me, Arjun. Good to be here.
No, pleasure. So Shant, as I said at the beginning, right, typically people who are on that seat tend to come from the world of financial services, banking, fintech, great bedtime listening, right, for obvious reasons. I'm pretty confident people are going to be looking forward to hearing what you have to say and the slant you have towards it. But before we sort of get into, TikTok and the region and beyond the region and the stuff that you're doing with the financial services business, and I've got a few questions around, what do I do with my kids and their love for TikTok, could you explain a little bit about what you do in your role?
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, I lead the business for TikTok across everything east and south of Greece. That's probably a more colorful way of putting it. Been with the company just over 3 years. So I like to look at my journey as to what was the focus over the last 1,000 days and what's the focus over the next 1,000 days. So over the last 1,000 days, TikTok was a nascent platform and was an even more nascent business. So I joined the company to kind of help build a vision as to what does TikTok represent across this region, building a team that delivers against that vision, kind of the strategic priorities in terms of how we think about our content, how do we think about commercializing and making a business out of that content. So that's what I've predominantly spent my time on over the last 1,000 days, kind of build mode, if you will. The next 1,000 days are how do we supercharge that, right? We've earned our right to play, right? We've gone from being this app that might have been considered a place for lip syncing and dancing during COVID. Probably one of the last corners of sunshine on the internet during those dark days, to something a lot more diversified, a lot bigger, kind of the entertainment platform. Some might even say the edutainment platform of reference. So these are some of the topics that I'm now thinking about as we look at the next 1,000 days across, what does this mean for audiences across Asia, Middle East, and Africa? And what does it mean for businesses? And our creators as well in this wide region.
So no, that's great. So actually you've made my life a lot easier because I can now split my questions from the last 1,000 days and the next 1,000 days. So can we start from the last 1,000 days, right? I'm going to try and sort of hone into the world of, I guess, the Middle East, Africa region first, right? Because that's sort of more closer to the proximity, not suggesting that people in APAC are any less important to this show. Talk about the evolution in terms of, how has TikTok come along over the last sort of 3 years or a bit in this part of the world. If you can actually share some numbers, that would be even better. But again, I don't want to put you on the spot for this because, some companies are sensitive about numbers and so on and so forth. But very keen to hear about the evolution.
Absolutely. And I think evolution is probably the right word. Because if one were to think about what is TikTok and why it's been as successful as it's been, we probably need to look at the evolution of digital media over the last 20 years and understand the shifting consumer behaviors that have made TikTok the platform it is today. So if you think about the last 20 years, I believe there's been 4 phases in digital media. In the late 90s, early 2000s, it was the era of the portals, right? Web 1.0. You'd go to your favorite portal, wait for an editor to put content that they thought might be useful and informative to you. And that's how you consumed content, right? There was a single creator and consumption was passive. We call that the age of context. You went to your portal and went to the section within the portal that met the context you were interested in. You like cars, you went to the car section. You like finance, you went to the finance section. The second evolution was search engines. Search engines said, well, sometimes people are explicitly and actively looking for information. How do we categorize and classify this information on the internet for them to find the content that they're searching for? And that's the age of search, or what is known as the knowledge graph, right? And then the third evolution was, well, sometimes people aren't explicitly looking for things or don't know what to look for. How do they discover things? And in the real world, you usually discover content through word of mouth, friends, family, right? And so social media companies started to flourish in terms of saying, well, we're going to create digital word of mouth. We're going to create the social graph, social media. We're going to start presenting content based on your social circles, and you get to consume content from those social circles. So we went from the age of context, portals, age of knowledge, search, age of social media. And we're now arguably in the fourth phase, which is the age of content. So tech has evolved over these last 20 years, and machine learning is incredibly smart in terms of saying, I don't necessarily need to know what you're explicitly looking for, search. I don't need to only rely on what your friends and family and people you follow are creating for you to consume content from. The algorithm is smart enough to figure out what's relevant to you, irrespective of where it comes from. So that's the age of content, the content graph. And TikTok's very much at the forefront of that, right? If do you spend time on TikTok?
I do. And I was going to I was going to give you the plug later, but I'll there. Actually, I use it both for personal use, and I also have a short form video, which is under the Couchonomics umbrella, which comes out every week, and we've had phenomenal success, or at least what I think is phenomenal success. I have no relative bar to compare it with in terms of the adoption. Although I should know a little bit more about who's consuming that data, but there's about 150,000 people every week who see that. So I don't know if that's a good or bad number, but yes, in a very long answer to your question, yes, I do use it both for personally. Personally, I tend to use it for, I guess, partly entertainment, partly it's got some insightful news, but I've increasingly started using it for, if I may say, quasi business.
Very good. So you're both a content consumer, right? And the For You page is showing you content that is relevant to you, whether it's entertainment or whether it's more kind of informative content. You're also starting to become a creator on the platform. And I think that's something that the age of content is known for, where it's kind of democratized content creation as well. So that kind of explains the evolution of consumer behavior, and hence why TikTok's been successful, because it lends itself very well to that consumer shift. Mm-hmm. Now, with all of this content democratization, what it's enabled to do is for communities to start flourishing around specific content categories, mm-hmm. right? So, there's a very healthy community around BookTok. People who love reading books and comparing notes. What were used to be book clubs in the physical world are now revived in an online version on TikTok through Book Club, and it has 173 billion views globally.
Wow.
Or topics like BeautyTok, right? Or Food Talk. People who are passionate about beauty or food, 60 billion views each, by the way. Or Clean Talk. People who are aficionados of cleaning and they want to showcase different ways that they clean their house, their car, their pets, whatever else that might be. So there's this content democratization and communities that are flourishing around this content. So long answer to your question as to what have the last 1,000 days been like, in Middle East and North Africa, very similar kind of dynamics, right? There's been a flourishing of content creation around specific types of communities, different categories, primarily within the entertainment space and the performance space, right? But more and more now in the lifestyle space and edutainment and things of the sort. And brands also are starting to pay attention to that, because they realize that all of this content means that there's a lot of users. The reach is there, right? And when they're thinking about media platforms to market on, they're looking at reach. Over 1 billion users of the platform globally. Mm-hmm. I can't share specific regional numbers, but you can imagine it's a healthy proportion. But it's not only about reach, it's also about the relevance and the resonance of that content. On average, people watch a movie's length of content on the platform every day.
Wow.
Right? Mm-hmm. So if you're a marketeer, if you're a brand or a content creator, all of a sudden you're going, okay, the reach is there and it's relevant. People are not just scrolling by. They're not just checking TikTok. They're watching TikTok. We're an entertainment platform. We're not a social media platform. And then you start seeing results because of that, whether it's 150,000 views for mm-hmm. one of your videos, or if you're a brand, it's actually driving either brand awareness for your marketing and your business, or maybe even driving sales and business growth. And we'll talk about how maybe in financial services, we've seen some very tangible examples of that.
I do want to get into it, but before we sort of get into that bit, here's a question I have, and help me. Maybe you've already answered this question, but I'll ask it in any case. Without doubt, machine learning, AI is making things that much more efficient, relevant, whatever the appropriate word is. How do you guys factor in the cultural sensitivities which sort of exist across, a global sort of market which you're servicing, right? And obviously, as my feed is coming from all parts of the world. At least that's what I see. You mentioned food. I tend to see a lot of the food. I like to cook. So I see content creators from different parts of the world. So how do you guys monitor, or it's not monitor, how do you actually factor in the cultural sensitivity it sort of sits in?
Look, I think the broader topic there is, how do you ensure user safety and user trust?
Sure.
Right? And which is kind of priority zero for a platform like ours. And it all really boils down to the community guidelines that we have that are very extensive as to what type of content is permissible and not permissible on the platform, globally, regionally, locally, right? Even by age. We'll talk about that shortly as a parent. I'm sure you've got a few questions. And the management of those community guidelines, whether it's refreshing them as new content categories might appear, right? Consumer behaviors shift all the time, or ensuring that any content that breaks those community guidelines never actually makes it on the platform, or whereby we minimize that risk as much as possible, right? In terms of cultural nuances and what is permissible and not permissible on the platform. So it's a great question in terms of, with all of the gargantuan amount of content that is now coming onto the platform every day. How do you ensure that A, it's relevant content to you, right? And the recommendation engine is incredibly smart at figuring that out. But B, how do you make sure people are safe on the platform? So those are kind of some of our user safety mechanisms, the community guidelines, the moderators that we have and around the world that understand local nuances, they understand the language, they can play a role there, and they're enabled by technology as well in terms of being able to flag content that should not be on the platform.
Awesome. I've got a question. Maybe you want to answer. You said you've got 1 billion users on the platform. Do you have a number of how many people are contributing content?
Not off the top of my head.
Right. Is it in hundreds of millions?
I'll have to get back to you on that. But the fact that many consumers keep coming back to that platform and watching a movie's worth of content every day means that the content is fresh. There's enough new content there for them to consume.
Okay. All right. Let's switch a little bit to the business world, right? Again, for the sake of the audience, and I'm sure quite a few of them know it, but maybe just for my sake, TikTok for business, right? It says what it says on the tin, right? It's TikTok for business. Briefly sort of describe it and talk about a little bit about how that's taken off in this part of the world.
Absolutely. And maybe we'll make it even more relevant to financial institutions, given
that would be great.
The focus of Couchonomics. So TikTok for Business is effectively the platform for marketeers, right? For brands, for companies, to get their message across to the audiences and their potential buyers, consumers, customers on TikTok. Whether it is driving brand awareness for a new product launch they might have, or just building brand equity, all the way down to driving intent to purchase something, or the actual conversion, the actual purchase of a service or a product, either online or offline. So kind of that's the broader element of TikTok for business, and it's done phenomenally well, both here and in the region. We're here and globally, pardon me, and we're humbled to see that so many what we call advertisers are leaning into the platform and trying to get their marketing message across to these audiences. Now, if we think about the financial services industry, that tends to be maybe a little bit more conservative, right?
Not a little bit more, quite a lot. And we tend to be sort of slightly behind the curve, but that's okay.
Well, we'll see that there's actually pockets of activity across the region where you'll be pleasantly surprised at the innovation that some of these financial institutions are driving. But if we kind of take a step back around that community element, right? Again, consumer centricity. Financial literacy is not something one gets taught in school.
Yes.
Right? No one teaches you how to manage your money, right? Or terms like APRs, variable, fixed rates, mortgages, credit card loans, et cetera, et cetera. And what we've seen is that the FinTok community is flourishing and growing incredibly fast on TikTok.
Excellent.
So hashtags like #finance has 13 billion views globally.
Wow.
Money Talk has 21 billion views globally. FinTok has over 4 billion views globally. So you can see that people are coming to TikTok to get authentic, relatable insights on how to think about finance. And there's a role to play for brands, for financial institutions in those communities. But it requires a change in the way these brands position themselves. Financial institutions typically are seen as service providers, but how do they become lifestyle enablers? How do they become trusted partners in that community? And we've seen examples of that, right? We've seen brands like QNB in Qatar lean into magic moments like the FIFA World Cup back in November, December last year to say, well, we want to resonate with this passionate community of football fans and the fact that we're a sponsor, right, of this magic moment to be part of that conversation. And so they had what we call a hashtag challenge. They involved creators in saying, show us your, what football means to you, and post about that and put this hashtag against it, etc. And they started building an affinity with that community. Or Visa did a similar thing with the World Cup, right? Mm-hmm. So brand building, brand equity. Visa had a whole movement around show your before and after preparation for the FIFA World Cup. Millions of views, a lot of user-generated content that could be attributed back to that movement that Visa created. But that's probably, it's, in the minds of a CEO or CFO at a bank, that's cute. Okay, great. We did some brand building. But we're seeing banks lean into actually driving user acquisition, right? Net new customers, especially when it comes to their digital offering or their neobanks. I'll give you two examples. Denizbank, one of the biggest banks in Turkey, worked with creators to talk about its digital proposition. And actually, through those TikTok campaigns, generated almost 30% of their net new customers for their digital banking assets, right?
Wow. Okay.
So all of a sudden it starts becoming meaningful in terms of its driving business. Yapi Credit is another example of that. And we actually did a meta study that shows that on average, anywhere between 25 and 40% of these net new users or customers to the bank when it comes to the digital proposition could be attributed to the TikTok campaigns that these banks did, right? So it starts becoming something, oh, that's cute brand building, to, whoa, this is actually driving conversions. It's driving business. It's driving commercial opportunities for us as a bank. So that's an example of where TikTok for Business, advertising on our platform, has actually driven meaningful outcomes for financial institutions.
So let me ask you a question, right? So I have no doubt it can do it, right? My observation, and I could be wrong with it, is typically the financial services sector, and we can pick on the banks or the insurance companies alike, is they've had a fairly hard time migrating from what I call traditional marketing to digital marketing, right? For a lot of them, digital marketing was create a website, put a few sort of adverts out there, create some presence on some of these social platforms, put out a report or two every week or month, or whatever the frequency is, right? They have generally sort of, if I may use the term, lacked the ability to properly plug in and leverage sort of digital marketing, leave alone this sort of fourth generation that you talked about at the beginning. Are you guys, and maybe you are you guys actually reaching out to these banks and financial institutions and sitting with them and saying, right, guys, let us actually tell you how this could be done? Because I would imagine that would be hugely powerful, because I think there is a aha moment, right, for everybody here. And I've yet to meet bankers yet who are talking as as openly about the fact that, they are concentrating on TikTok to drive their next campaign with regards to a co-brand credit card they've launched, which I think would be hugely valid. Or, someone launching a wallet, which is targeted to, I guess, the more digitally savvy, who I would imagine are pretty much all on TikTok, right? So what are you doing in terms of sort of bringing people along on that journey, or bringing these institutions along on the journey?
So the examples I brought up, these are very active partnerships where we work closely with these financial institutions, saying, what are you trying to achieve, and how can TikTok enable you and help you to achieve those goals, right? Whether it's brand building or driving net new customers of a digital proposition, or driving just leads for their traditional assets. But there is genuine curiosity at the highest levels of all of these institutions. I've had multiple conversations with group CEOs, etc., or CMOs at these banks and insurance companies, etc., to say, well, if we want to future-proof our business, we need to be where the consumers are, especially the next generation consumers. And the challenge is not why should I do TikTok or what should I do on TikTok. It's usually how should I be active on TikTok.
Totally.
So I have business partnership teams that work hand in hand with these institutions to say, well, let us help you. We're the experts of the platform. You're the experts of your business. Let's bring those two elements together. But it needs to come across, the messaging and the marketing needs to come across in the spirit of what TikTok is, which is an authentic, relatable, genuine platform where you're not speaking to an audience. It's not a one-way conversation to say, here's a credit card, here are the terms and conditions, why don't you sign up now? That's just not going to work. How are you speaking with an audience? How are you speaking through an audience? And that's two-way conversation and interaction, being part of the community and building trust in that community to say, you know what, I'm not even going to try and sell you something. I'm going to first help you in this journey of financial literacy, right? And building that trust to then say, and by the way, I have a product or service that could meet your needs. And that doesn't hold true just for financial institutions, by the way. That's across all industries.
All industries, right? I agree with you. Yeah.
Marketing 1.0 of speaking to an audience, that one-way conversation, saying, I think this is what they want to hear, and fingers crossed it'll land, versus, well, you know what? How I interpret, as a consumer, how I interpret your brand may be very different to what you had in mind as a CMO. So how are you starting to have these interactive conversations with audiences, whether it's leveraging their favorite creators they trust, like yourself, right? 150,000 views of specific videos. Others in the financial sector, I've got examples top of mind. There's a creator called Dubai Banker, right? He's got hundreds of thousands of followers, does these short snippets around financial advice. There's a creator called Fouad Sidki, I think, who does something similar. So how do you start then associating yourself as a brand to some of these movements of financial literacy, et cetera, to then sell your products and services? Entertainment first, sales second.
Sales second, right? So okay, so there's a few statements I'll make, but there's a question. Please correct me if I've got this wrong. So I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with regards to a lot of financial institutions still struggle with this two-way dialogue, right? And I can understand why, right? Because financial products can become very emotive. Things like, as you said, APRs are there's very strong opinions out there, and a lot of the banking world would rather not be in a two-way dialogue in an open platform. But people are coming around. Things have changed, at least in my career over the last 10 to 15 years. I've seen a big shift. I remember a decade ago, I would be told on conferences that, Arjun, you're not going to talk about APRs, right? Now nobody comes and tells me that before I actually go onto stages, right?
Well, the thing is, if you're not going to talk about them, they're still going to get their information somewhere else.
They will.
It's just that you're now out of the conversation.
Exactly. And I think that realization has come, right? But I think like any other thing, it's sort of taken time for it to arrive and for it to distill. The second part of the equation, and I think there's two parts to this question, and I hope I'm sort of eloquent enough in asking that question, is one is how much of a role are the marketing agencies, right, playing in this sort of learning and evolution of these institutions, right? Because with all due respect, again, nothing again, marketing agencies, why reinvent the wheel when it's working, right? That there's obviously that logic. And And then the second question, part of it, and I don't know, is how much of the business that you are actually creating for yourself with financial institutions, or if I may say, slightly more conservative industries, I don't want to sort of just point my finger at financial, is push versus pull?
So to answer your first question, it is absolutely, and I don't like the word, but I'm going to use it, an ecosystem play, right? All parties are sitting around a table and saying, this is the consumer shift that we're all privy to. How are we going to have a seat at that table, whether it's the CMO, the marketing team at a brand, or whether it's their media agency and or creative agency. So there's genuine curiosity to say our consumers are there, and therefore we need to be there too. And agencies as our trusted partners who know this industry, because we're a tech platform, we're not a media agency, right? So working with those agencies, working with the brands to say, okay, let's figure this out together. And those are, by the way, the most successful mature conversations and partnerships that we have across all industries, across all the markets that that I oversee. But it is a journey. It is a journey. Consumers move a lot faster than businesses. And so how do you keep up? How do you keep up with these movements? How do you keep up with the zeitgeist of where the platform is going and stay relevant? And agencies play an important role in that, in terms of how they buy their media, optimize the media on behalf of the brands. And creative agencies play an important role. So I like to actually talk about the fact that this is now a creative renaissance because of what I alluded to earlier, the democratization of content creation. So people no longer just want to see a Super Bowl ad. That's not the only thing they want, right? They're not just going to wait for one big magic moment a year for the best ads. Everyday creative matters. They're on these platforms consuming content day in, day out. And the brand message that is coming to them should be something they celebrate, not skip. Right? And the thumb is king. It'll skip through, especially on a mobile phone, in terms of, within 2 seconds, this doesn't resonate with me, right? I'm going to skip it. So how do you build creative at scale? How do you build marketing messages that are actually going to resonate with consumers? So those are the conversations we're having with creative agencies to say there's a creative renaissance. You can't just solve for big magic moments, a big Ramadan campaign or a big Super Bowl campaign or a big shopping season campaign. What about that everyday creative? And how are you building all of these assets and content that is relatable and authentic and genuine that people want to see, not being spoken to, but spoken with? So it is a paradigm shift because these creative agencies and media agencies are not used to that. The variety of content that is required, the volume of content that is required, the velocity at which they need to build this content. So my 3 V's, as I like to call them, I like my alliterations. We're trying to help the ecosystem figure this out as well.
Fascinating. Coming back to financial literacy. So I'm a father of 2 young girls, and I think you put a point on financial literacy, which is very close to heart. So I for whatever little time I have taken out time to go to schools, speak to the kids anywhere between the age of 10 to they graduate and talk about, the sector that I work in. But this is not about financial education, just about financial education or financial literacy. What are you guys doing in terms of just general education and specifically STEMs, if I may or STEM, if I may actually focus on that? How's your platform sort of becoming, an avenue for education?
So I'm going to ask you a question. We spoke about different hashtags, right? BeautyTok, FinTok, FoodTok. Do you know how many views the hashtag Learn on TikTok has?
I have no clue.
Almost 600 billion.
Right. Learn on TikTok.
Learn on TikTok.
Okay.
So the platform lends itself very well for people to discover content. And that content isn't only entertaining content. It can be edutainment. It can be educational. Any content that's going to resonate with them. Now, because of this realization, A, that people are coming to our platform to learn things, right? And B, that we have a responsibility towards them and towards parents to play an active role in, or at least to play a role in that journey. We've done a few things. In the US, as an example, we've launched a dedicated feed, a dedicated For You page for STEM topics. So when you open up your TikTok in the US, you'll see content from people you follow, content that the recommendation engine says, it could be relevant to you, your For You page. And now there's a dedicated feed for STEM.
Right.
And we've partnered with reputable educational institutions to say what kind of content could be relevant there. And we've done that in the region as well with a hub that we call School Ready.
Okay.
So we've partnered with the likes of Noon Academy, with the likes of Abwab and Nafham, right? To say, let's start packaging bite-sized educational content for children that are up to high school age. And remember, the app is 13 plus, so think 13 to 18, with content that could be relevant to them in terms of their educational journey. And so this is readily available today in the Middle East. So you can see there's a very kind of active engagement around edutainment and this bite-sized content as opposed to long-form, more traditional educational videos. It's a responsibility that we take very seriously. And we make sure that we partner with reputable institutions to find that right type of content for children.
And that's good to hear, actually. So I'm going to ask you the hard question, and I'm sure I'm not the only father or mother or parent who's ever asked you, right? TikTok is for 13 and above, from what I understand, right? Or that's what I've read. Every 10 to 13-year-old that I know has TikTok, right? We as parents are failing. I do take that responsibility, and I'm obviously generalizing for all parents out here. Maybe some people have been more consensual and they've given their kids that access. My kids were, I guess, smarter than me and found a way around it, right? What do parents do, right? Because while I want, because I do see the creative side to it, right? And I'm all for that in terms of encouraging creativity, and the fact that more and more educational stuff is out there on it is great, right? But there's still a lot of stuff which, if I may call, is a little bit trivial. Nothing wrong with that, right? It's just a bit trivial. And my worry is that if they're spending, let's say, 90 minutes a day or an hour a day on TikTok, they're not spending 55 minutes on the trivial stuff and 5 minutes on the smart stuff. So, how do you answer parents like us?
Look, I'm a parent as well, right? I have a 10-year-old and a 3-year-old.
I hope your 3-year-old is not planning to be on TikTok yet.
Neither of them are on TikTok,
Okay.
because as we discussed, TikTok is an app for 13 years and above, right? And we take that responsibility very seriously, right? How do we protect the most vulnerable audiences?
Right.
So first and foremost, we're rated as a 12 plus app. That's the way it's done on the Apple App Store, right? And on Google Android as well, in terms of people being able to download the app or not, right? So if you've got device controls for your child's device where they're below the age of 12, they shouldn't even be able to download the app, right? And when they, for some reason, manage to find that loophole of being able to download the app, we play a very active role in terms of ensuring that we've got content moderators, etc., who might say, this profile is below the age of 13. We're going to stop the account, right? And
Right.
I've had many calls from friends who are parents saying, my daughter's profile just got blocked. Can you do anything about it? I'm like, how old is your daughter? Like 11. I'm like, I can't do anything about it.
Can I give you my daughter's name?
offline. And I'm so sorry. But for 13 plus, how do we ensure these teenagers are safe? And so by default, if you're between the ages of 13 and 17 and you've downloaded the app, there'll be certain more restrictive settings on your on your profile. Screen time limit of 60 minutes by default, right? and then you can have a conversation as a parent as to what that limit should be, and we'll talk about that in terms of the tools that can be made available for parents as well. The fact that by default they can't receive direct messages from people they don't know, or that the content categories they might be exposed to are a little bit more restrictive. And so you see that as it's a more restrictive kind of journey for these 13 to 17 year olds. Now, it doesn't stop there. So it doesn't stop on what by default we've instituted to keep people safe between the ages of 13 and 17. We've also provided tools for parents, what we call family pairing, right?
Okay.
Where you can mirror the account of your child and put in restrictions in terms of time they spend on the platform, what kind of content categories they can see what they're being exposed to, right? So family pairing is something that's readily available, right? And then it boils down to you as a parent having that conversation with your child. But it doesn't stop there either, right? We work very closely with regulators, with stakeholders that play an active role in cyberbullying and cyber safety, etc. You know, we've done initiatives with eSafe, which is the Emirati, Safe Internet Association. We've done initiatives with UNICEF around awareness campaigns around cyberbullying and what content is and isn't, and how to be safe on the platform. We've even built our own safety advisory council, which we work with subject matter experts, third parties, a thing from academia, experts in the topic to say, what more can we do to keep our most vulnerable audiences safe, right? We don't have all the answers. You're the experts. Let's work together towards that. And we keep evolving our community guidelines as well. So from a user safety perspective, a teenager safety perspective, these are all the different things, whether it's 13 plus, right? As a get-go, 13 to 17, a restricted kind of profile. Family pairing for you as a parent to have the tools in order to monitor or create some further safeguards. Community guidelines to ensure safety, plus working around cyberbullying and cyber kind of awareness campaigns to keep them safe on the platform.
That's excellent. I think parents are going to love this, because I'm not quite sure every parent actually is fully aware of this whole family pairing. I wasn't actually. So either I'm ignorant, or I think this is going to be helpful for a lot of people. So thanks for that, Shant. You alluded to a very interesting example. You mentioned something very interesting, which is that you work with governments and regulators, right? So here's the challenge in my humble opinion. One is, I think, government and regulators need to better understand this part of the world, and I think we've seen enough television shows, hearings, so on and so forth, regarding this topic, where actually you can see that there is actually a delta among policymakers in terms of them fully understanding this new world which is emerging. And I don't think it's anybody's fault. It's just moving so quick that it's hard to stay ahead of the curve if you're not in the industry, if I may say so. So what is it that you guys are doing specifically in the region to both inform, educate the policymakers, and at the same time sort of guide the thinking in terms of how the regulation shifts regarding data, privacy, access, and so on and so forth. These not just TikTok, but the peer group that you guys are a part of.
So you'll appreciate that it's uncharted territories.
Totally. Yeah.
In terms of how we think about all of this, right? Now, we mentioned kind of partnerships around topics of safety awareness, internet safety awareness, cyberbullying. These are just some examples of how we may partner with a regulatory body, a media regulatory body, etc. And they've got their own kind of cyber security conversations around that lawmaking. But on a broader level, I think what's useful to demystify, considering some of the things that we might have seen, right, in recent months, whether it's congressional hearings, etc., is busting a few myths about the platform, right? because it's disappointing, honestly, that there are these movements without necessarily understanding what the fundamentals of the platform are. And first and foremost, the fact that we put user safety as kind of the paramount priority. And we'll continue to evolve towards that mission. Are we going to get it 100% right? Risks, we're looking at minimizing the risk as much as possible. In any situation, you're never going to get to 0% risk. But how do we position the understanding of our platform? So first and foremost, we're an entertainment platform, right? Our mission is to inspire creativity and bring joy. And we very still hold, we keep ourselves very aligned to that mission, right? But then how are we ensuring that the type of content on the platform resonates with that mission? We've spoken about the community guidelines and things of the sort. And then the positioning of the platform in each market or country that we're in, we want to make sure that it is within the legal frameworks of that country, the regulatory frameworks of that country, while respecting also our community guidelines.
Sure.
Now, TikTok is an international app.
Yep.
Right? It operates globally, except for China and India, for a variety of reasons. So we are an international app that happens to be headquartered in a variety of places. Singapore and LA are kind of the main hubs. And we are constantly looking as to how do we, and we spoke about this offline as well, how do we think about data sovereignty and interoperability and things of the sort. So for example, in the US, and this is public knowledge, it's in the press, etc., we have what we call USDS, US Data Security, right? Which is a dedicated entity that safeguards all of US data in the US, in US data centers overseen by US partners, right? So if there's a question around data sovereignty and who has access to that, etc., this is probably the first of its kind in the industry, right? In terms of saying, okay, we're so adamant about making people feel comfortable with how they use the platform that these are the types of ring fences we're going to put, whereby there's a third party that's actually overseeing how we operate. We've got transparency centers in the US and in other countries where we invite regulators and policymakers to have a peek under the hood, how the algorithm works, how the recommendation engine works, and things of the sort. We're looking at doing similar things, in different realities like Europe, etc. So it is a journey. I don't think that there's a very clear kind of destination to say, regulatory wise, everything is fine for everybody, right? But it is a topic of priority for us to say we need to safeguard users, we need to safeguard their data. And these are some of the measures that we've put in place.
Okay, so we're going to get out of this whole heavy conversation of regulation. We're going to have some fun now. So let's talk a little bit about content creation, right?
All right.
And let's talk a little bit about this region. So in terms of categories, right, of popularity in terms of content creation, what's the trending? What are the 2 or 3 trending categories where you're actually seeing, most traction in terms of content creation?
So entertainment is kind of the top category, and entertainment's a broad way of saying things like, esports, gaming, cosplay, things where you're consuming content more than anything else. And then there's this kind of, the next one is around performance arts. Right. The more explicit forms of pop culture, whether it's, singing and dancing, but also things like comedy, things like theater. These are becoming more and more popular, right? We're seeing lifestyle topics become more and more important. Think, health tips, recipes, food, fashion, beauty, these types of topics. So, and then education's starting to become a more and more, top of mind as well. So it's nothing different to what people would expect, most likely, in terms of the kind of the big content categories. But these are the ones that we're seing a lot of movements around.
And so what are you guys doing specifically for the content creators? Is there anything that you do, or do you let it just sort of organically sort of flourish? And
so there's a few things.
Right.
We try to help budding creators hone their art, right?
All right.
Through what we call the Creator Hub, which is a resource, a one-stop shop of all the tips and tricks on how to create on TikTok. But there's also there's a mentorship program, right, where more established creators might help fledgling creators.
Sign me up for that.
Right, that could be a fun journey, right? We invest in content partnerships. Right. So one of the ones that comes to mind is what we did with Rotana, right?
Okay.
Where music artists that are signed with Rotana can start getting, royalties and things of the sort when their music is used on our platform, right? We do sports partnerships. So, for example, we live streamed the Egyptian Super Cup on the platform, right? So it's not just kind of creator-led content, but also some of these more traditional content creators around topics of sports and music and education that are starting to flourish on the platform as well. But then how can these creators make a living out of this? And by the way, I call them creators, and I'm glad that you do too, not influencers.
Oh, no, I hate the word influencers, by the way. So, I go on record in saying that there's a particular. So I'm called an influencer in some particular platform, and I unfortunately it's not their fault. That's the default word they have, but I actually don't like the word influencer at all.
If you'll allow me, I'd like to make a distinction as to what a creator is versus an influencer.
Go ahead.
An influencer is primarily chasing popularity.
Okay.
A creator is building in an area that they're passionate about. So it's passion as impact versus popularity as impact, right? So a lot of these creators that flourish on TikTok, they start because they are so passionate about a specific topic. Couchonomics is probably an example of that, right? You're not looking at how many followers am I getting, but rather I'm just genuine to talk about this topic. And if the topic is relatable, authentic, genuine, resonates, it's going to find those communities that want to consume that kind of content, that the content is relevant to. So that to me is the distinction between creators and influencers.
Sure.
So Creator Hub, content creators and the partnerships that we do there. But then how are we helping them potentially make a living out of this? And so we've built a creator marketplace.
Right. Okay.
Which is a fancy way of saying it's a partner directory of creators that brands can say, I have a brief for a marketing campaign, and I'd like to see what proposals creators may have towards that brief. How would they present our story from their tone of voice? And if they like what they see, they can hire them for that campaign. And that creator is going to get paid based on the rate that they've decided they're going to put on that creator marketplace. There's over 800,000 creators globally on the platform, right? Over 100,000 in our part of the world, right? And these are kind of conservative numbers. And it's a great place for brands to find creators that might resonate with the communities they want to get their message across, where they're not speaking to the audience, they're speaking through an audience, right? Creators that are trusted in those communities. And a great way for creators to find brands who want to work with them. So they no longer have to go and knock on brands' doors. They can say, I'm here, I'm available, send me your briefs. So that creator marketplace starts becoming a very interesting way to build a livelihood, right, out of an area that you're passionate about.
And actually, that's again, this is turning into an incredibly informative session, because I'm actually not suggesting that I haven't learned across all the other 50 odd episodes I've had, but this is a topic that as I don't know if I can even qualify as a creator. At least I'm attempting to be one, right? It's incredible how little I know about what I can actually do in TikTok. I will have a conversation once this is actually actually over, but it's separate. So you mentioned the next 1,000 days and the supercharge, if I got that word correct, right? Now, I'm not asking you to spill the secrets out here. Obviously, you got your playbook, but what elements are going to be critical in terms of supercharging for the next 1,000 days?
So I like frameworks, and I call it the 5 C's framework.
Okay.
Content, communities, consumers, creators, and commerce. All right. So we'll keep evolving kind of the content graph that we're at the forefront of. What kind of content is going to be relevant to different audiences, whether some of these partnerships that I mentioned, that we've done with Rotana or the Egyptian Football Federation, things of the sort. How is that then, how are consumers leaning into those content categories and moving from being content voyeurs to content creators, or moving from being a consumer to a prosumer, right? They're starting to create and becoming a production house as well, which then makes them creators, right? Potentially building a livelihood out of their areas of passion. So that's another area that we're kind of doubling down on. How do we enable more creativity, more creators to embrace their passions and make a living out of that art? How are we making these communities flourish? These digital campfires around specific topics. We spoke about, things like BeautyTok and FinTok and BookTok. There's movements around Learn on TikTok and Pet Talk and Dog Talk and so many others, right? That just happen naturally, right? So how are we helping these digital campfires become a reality? So that's making sure I'm covering all the C's, right? So content, creators, the role that consumers play as prosumers or creators, communities, and then commerce, right? Because we actually see a convergence between content and commerce.
Okay.
Right? And we like to call that shoppertainment.
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 All right. Is that going into the Cambridge Dictionary soon?
Maybe, right? Because it's a fancy way or a cute way of saying people in this day and age want to be entertained. They want to be energized. They want to be engaged. They want to be excited about content that they're consuming. And as a result of that, they're then taking a meaningful action in terms of buying something. Yeah. So content first, commerce second, but how are you bringing those things together? Because for the longest time on digital, it's always been about buy now, buy now, buy now, right? You see an ad, it's very transactional. It's like, hey, you like this product, buy it now, right? And that's fine. It will cover for a transactional need, right? Maybe there's a convenience aspect. Hey, it'll get delivered to your door in less than 2 hours. Refunds are free, whatever else. Those are kind of transactional behaviors that consumers want fulfilled. But what about their experiential behaviors, right? How are you building affinity and trust and entertainment and engagement? So shoppertainment is exactly that. Starting to get your message out, not because you're trying to sell something forcefully, but because you generally have a voice as a brand in those communities. And as a result of that, you're building trust. And so when you are selling a product or a service, it just resonates a lot more. I'll give you a few stats. Consumers on TikTok, when they look at creators, they think that they think the communication is a lot more authentic when it comes from creators. 62% of consumers think so. 76% of consumers think that creators are a lot more approachable than brands may be. 72% of them think that they're a lot more informative than brands and traditional publishers of content. And 61% of them think they're a lot more believable. So imagine if brands start collaborating with creators and having a voice in these communities, and then as a result of that, start selling products and services. So they're not going in saying, I want to sell. They're going in saying, I want to be part of the conversation. And as a result of having a genuine voice in that conversation, I can maybe sell. So shoppertainment is that movement.
All right.
And in APAC, we did a study in APAC, and that's why I'll talk about Asia Pacific. It's a $1 trillion opportunity, right? Moving from transactional e-commerce to more experiential commerce.
So
these are some of the things that I'm focused on over the next 1,000 days. How are we getting the right type of content on the platform? How are we getting consumers to become prosumers and hence creators? What are the different communities that are going to start flourishing beyond some of the ones that we discussed? And then how are we enabling kind of the next generation of commerce, which is things like live commerce, native commerce, or this movement of shoppertainment?
Fascinating, right? And you know, it's not because the numbers are staggering, but I think what I feel is that I think the delta or the bridge that we have to cross as businesses is actually while it's defined, it's actually quite vast, and I think it does need a lot of help and support, in my humble opinion. I'm going to come to a question about that in terms of what other players in the ecosystem can do to help. But I just had a question in terms of, so you're obviously known for short form video, right? And you mentioned that you've done live streamings also. Is there an intent of TikTok to sort of evolve in terms of the way the content is actually, I guess, provided or consumed? Are you going to go into longer form videos? Is that part of the plans?
We're an entertainment platform,
right?
Right. A lot of that content has been short form, right? 15, 30-second videos. But we do allow for 10-minute videos, right? And it really kind of boils down to how relevant is the content? How much is it going to resonate? So it's not about the format itself.
All right.
It's about how good the content is. Right?
And you're getting traction in those longer form videos too.
If they're good content, absolutely. And sometimes from brands. I'll give an example of Hilton doing a 10-minute ad on TikTok.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Right? And because it was so experiential around a travel destination and what they could, it was almost like a mini documentary about specific locations. So it's no longer about, hey, have you been to the latest Hilton in a specific resort and, you know, bring your family, etc. It was more of, we're in the travel business, we're in the hospitality business, so let me play a role with that community. And it was a 10-minute ad. And the view-through rates, in other words, the completion rates, were staggeringly high because the content was relevant. It resonated with the community that is travel talk, right? So it's not about whether the content is long or short. Right? Attention spans are decreasing, and therefore the content needs to be snappy and engaging, etc. But it can be so in 15 seconds, or it can be so in 10 minutes.
Interesting. So, question for you. I'm conscious that I've kept you here for a long time, but your advice to, and I'm going to narrow it down to financial services entities, right? So I've taken a lot of things away. So, don't talk to your audience, i.e. don't try and sort of push a sale, try and be a part of the community. The second point was, content has got to be relevant, whether it's 15 seconds or 10 minutes, as long as it's relevant, it's well organized, people are consuming it. Work with the content creators for a number of reasons, and I think you gave some amazing statistics. Beyond that, what's kind of, if there is anything beyond that?
That's a great summary.
Right, sorry. I do listen, I said, because I'm learning, and I'm not saying this, but trust me, I'm really thoroughly enjoying this because it's put me so out of my sort of typical comfort zone, right? This is not a topic where, I can sort of go in there and say, sorry, Shant, I disagree with you on this or that, because to be honest, this is an educational sort of episode for myself. What is it that you would say to a CEO of a bank or an insurance company beyond those three things, right? Because I'm sure a good CMO has already got those things covered, right? Is there anything else that
I think mindset.
Right.
So it's very easy to be dismissive or judgmental, right? Oh, it's an app for kids, right? Or my teenagers use it. My conversation with most C-suite is, have you tried the app? Yeah. And why not if you haven't? And don't dismiss it. Be curious, right? There's that great TV show, Ted Lasso. He says, be curious, not judgmental. So that mindset of saying, let me try this out. A, as a consumer, because that's where my next generation consumers are, right? But B, what could it mean for my brand? Like, what kind of brand messages am I seeing that could resonate with me? And if tourism authorities are leveraging it, if beauty brands are leveraging it, if retailers are, if real estate players are, and they're seeing tangible kind of outputs that are meaningful for their business, why wouldn't financial institutions see it? And I've given some stats where we've seen financial institutions lean in and where they've had real impact, where it's had real impact on their business. And it really starts from the top, right? A CEO saying, folks, I want us to think about next generation platforms, right, to future-proof our business. And I'm on it as a consumer to start off with. But I've also seen CEOs start doing their own kind of TikTok accounts. A day in the life of a CEO. What goes through their mind as a financial institution leader, right? The good, the bad, and the ugly. That openness, that vulnerability, that authenticity is what audiences want to see these days.
And we mentioned audiences, right? And I think we had a very brief discussion before we actually sat down and started talking about it. TikTok's no more for just the kids, right? It's multi-generational.
Absolutely.
Do you have any stats to kind of share that? Can tell us, like, you know, how that has evolved? Even if you don't have to give me numbers, like how have you seen it evolve over the last 3 years while you've been with them?
So look, the majority of users are above the age of 25.
Wow.
I'll leave it at that.
Because I then have a question, right? So I'm sorry. This is I work for a consulting firm, right? And consultants produce a lot of content, right? Because we are in arguably, I guess, the game of producing thought leadership, Absolutely. Intellectual capital, whatever you want to call it. We produce a lot of reports. Most of us have become I say progressive. We've moved from reports to the video form. Now we have podcasts. We're on one of them, right? Webinars and so on and so forth. Because I guess the reach is greater. It's arguably more authentic. It's faster. There's an element of sort of vulnerability and rawness, which I personally think it resonates with the world, right? Do you have any advice for us consulting firms? Do we have to rethink how we actually disseminate and produce our content?
Look, I don't see why a platform like TikTok should not be part of your media mix.
Well, especially with the audience who's consuming, right? Because I think the typical conversation in any consulting firm typically would have been, well, they're 17-year-olds or 14-year-olds, right? What are we going to sell to them? But if you're saying majority of the people are above 25, and let's be honest, in this region you have arguably the youngest sort of average age among sort of senior and middle management, then and they're the people we want to speak to. It only makes sense, right?
Absolutely. And I'll give you an example from another market that I cover, without going into the specifics. They've used it as a recruiting tool. A company has used a financial institution has used it as a recruiting tool to say, here's what a day in the life of a banker looks like, and hear from the CEO, and let it tell you about, if you're on the trading team, what it means, and if you're on the M&A team, what it means, et cetera, et cetera. They've used it as a way to build employer branding. So maybe consultants should think along those lines as well. Why not?
No, I think it's but natural. Shant, last question. Out of the various countries which are in the Middle East, Africa region, right? And obviously the population varies. Where do you see greatest traction right now?
Look, the usual suspects, right? Both in terms of being digitally savvy, young populations, mobile first on the consumer side, but also big kind of tailwinds in transformation agendas. So countries like Saudi, countries like the UAE come to mind, but we've seen Egypt flourish.
I would imagine, yeah.
Turkey flourish. We've seen staggering deployment and involvement in places like South Africa and Nigeria and Pakistan. So it is not a one country phenomenon.
No, I totally agree with you in the sense, and it isn't. I'll be honest with you. I came across the platform years ago. I'll be honest with you. I was slow on it. I got involved when I realized that my kids were on it, and it was more about parenting than about getting used to it. And then I said, why don't I actually use it for my own purpose? So we came up with this whole concept, and actually we designed the whole concept for TikTok, right? I think we are only on TikTok. I'm not sure, but I'm not very good at the production side of it. I'm just more the conceptualizing person and provides the content. But it's been brilliant. I've really thoroughly enjoyed this session because I'm going to take a lot away, and I'm fairly sure that the audience that this show reaches out to, which is nowhere as large as the TikTok audience is, but hopefully one day we'll be able to do it. And we are increasingly using TikTok even for our podcast in terms of the short form videos which we can make so that we can actually market. And I think what I'm going to do is start monitoring in terms of what kind of conversion rates are we getting onto our sort of main platforms because a typical show here goes on for about an hour, right? 45 minutes to an hour, which is long. I'd like to thank you. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me. This has been thoroughly enjoyable.
No, well, it's a pleasure, and I hope to keep in touch with you and hear more about how sort of TikTok evolves over the years.
I look forward to it.
Right. So everybody, that was Shant Oknayan from TikTok. I'm fairly confident that there's a large percentage of you who are in the same sort of boat as me who've learned a lot today. I'm sorry to the FinTech folks that we didn't really get into that much FinTech, but all of us are parents. We all have products and solutions and services that we want to get out there. Here's a platform which allows for communities to do things which are incredibly inclusive and impactful. So, my advice to all of you is go out, explore if you haven't, and reach out to TikTok if you want some help, because it seems like there are several mechanisms in place out there to sort of help businesses and content creators. So with that, sort of goodbye. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.